Howdy. All right, for AP Human Geography, we're going to take a look today at some city problems. What I want to do is today and tomorrow, uh, Flash and I here, what we're going to do is we'll look at problems that cities have generically, a little bit that Omaha has, and I'll go through just some basics with you so you understand them. And then I want to go to some articles. So tomorrow on Classroom, basically Thursday, to go ahead and you'll take a look at some articles. And we're going to take a look at Detroit, which is a major, major problem. Okay. So, I want to give you a little background today, and then we'll get set it up, and then you'll read some articles tomorrow, and there'll be a simple assignment. You're going to go over to the classwork section, and the assignments will be in classroom on classwork. By the way, it's a beautiful day. Oh my God, today is just nice outside. You know, that's the one thing about distance learning. I don't like distance learning. I miss you kids. I miss teaching. But I'm out on my porch. Flash and I are out on the porch right now. It's just so beautiful outside. Today, it feels like springtime. You know, learning on outside is not such a bad deal. But anyhow, I digress. Back to work. All right, city problems. You have to know there's two main things. There are things that affect cities. You have centralizing forces, things that pull people into the city. They pull them back to the middle of the cities. And, you know, like stuff I've got listed here: entertainment, sports, and jobs. You know, why would you go to downtown Omaha? Well, in Omaha, you got the old market, great area, good things to do. You've got the CHI Center down there, so you get all your concerts when and if they ever happen again. You know, the College World Series. Those are things that pull people downtown. There's also people starting to move back downtown so they can be by all that. Those are centralizing forces, forces that pull people back into a city. You also have things that make people want to leave, decentralizing forces. People don't want to live in the cities. They want to get out to the suburbs. That's what we've been talking about with days with Bennington. And things like crime, overcrowding, high rents, and stuff like that really make, in a lot of cities, people want to move out. Got a niece and nephew live out in LA, and property values are just staggering. And so, you know, you just can't afford property. So they've been looking at maybe, you know, moving into different areas. And high rent is a big thing. Over crime, you know, some cities like we'll talk about Detroit or East St. Louis and stuff have had some crime problems. So there's things that pull people to the middle of the city and things that push people away. And these decentralizing forces, these problems are what we want to talk about today. Some of the things that make life, the quality of life, go down quite a lot are mostly decentralizing forces. Most commonly, if I ask you what's a problem in American City, biggest thing you're going to say, you know, is probably crime, you know, or other stuff. Pollution. In some cities more than others, you know, air pollution can be really tough. You go to LA, have you seen the pictures? Because everyone's been, you know, self quarantined and all that stuff. Have you seen where the air quality in LA is so clear you can see stuff now? That's a big factor. Drugs, crime, you know, go to the big cities and there's a lot more of that than here in Bennington, kind of. Congestion and noise. I hated New York. I was stationed there a while. God, it was just always bustle, 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 people and stuff. I like Bennington where you can get out and it's just quiet, you know? And then, you know, there's other things like slums. There's places where the housing just really stinks. Or transportation. Ask your relatives who live out in big cities like in LA what it's like to commute out there. Got a brother that lives in Fort Worth, and we go down to visit. I hate the interstates around Fort Worth. Oh my God, Dallas and Fort Worth, try driving around there. And problems like that make life in urban America or big city America maybe not so nice. Here's the problem. Once you get those decentralizing forces, the things that make people move out to the suburbs, man, what happens to the inner city? What happens to the city when everybody moves out? When people start moving out and out and out, kind of like a tree. When the inner part of the tree starts getting rotten, the tree's going to die. If your inner city area starts getting run down and people don't want to live there, the quality of life drops and people move out. And sometimes in cities, you can have, if you don't do something about it, a big shell. If you look at the picture here, look at that house across the street from this kid. You see one window with a rag in it, and all the other windows, everything's just busted out. Look at the doors that are locked and the quality of life there. Do you want to be right there? And when quality of life drops like that, people start thinking about leaving. And as the jobs move out to the suburbs, the people move out to the suburbs, what do you get in the inner city? There's what businesses are left to pay taxes. And the quality of life goes down, the services go down, the city runs down, and you get urban decay. And you very much so. I think a great example of this, I love St. Louis, big Cardinals fan, always been, big Blues fan, always been. I lived in St. Louis a couple of years, but I didn't live in St. Louis. I lived in the suburbs of St. Louis, Nobody, talk to people who live in St. Louis. They don't live in St. Louis. No one lives in St. Louis. Man, most people live in Richmond Heights or Maplewood or all the things around the city. Why? And because you don't want to live in, the Arch is great. Go downtown St. Louis. I've got a picture here. I'm going to show you real quick. Go down to St. Louis. You got the Arch. You got the downtown. That's great. You got the ballpark. That's fun. But get away from that a little bit and look at the rundown areas you start to get. And that's not even talking about East St. Louis. St. Louis gets some tax. I mean, they get people coming in, tourists to the Arch and other stuff, and tourists to watch the Cardinals play and other things. If you don't have that, what happens to your city? When I lived in St. Louis in the 80s, East St. Louis was really run down. They instituted, casinos and stuff like that to try to put some money back in. Because look at the pictures. When you start getting neighborhoods like this, you're going to have problems, and you have to address it. Okay. Now, a couple reasons that this happens. People start moving out, or we're going to get to in the next slide. But here's the big deal. A picture's worth 1,000 words, it's been said. Take a look at these two pictures here. These are Detroit and Michigan. These are neighborhoods in Detroit. Detroit is the motor city. They've made cars there forever. But remember, we talked about economic units, car manufacturers putting their plants in Ohio and Indiana and down south and all around and all. Detroit itself has changed. It's gone from a huge city to start shrinking. And look at the two pictures here. With these neighborhoods, you start to have a problem as people move out. Houses become empty. And you get empty houses, you've got problems. You get drugs and stuff like that. Or like in Detroit, people burn houses down. Halloween used to be a kind of an interesting place there. And look at this, these two pictures down here. You see just empty, abandoned houses in neighborhoods. One of the articles you're going to look at talks about how Detroit has got a problem. At one time, Detroit's had 33,000 abandoned houses, because that's an area the size of Omaha. It really is. Now, it doesn't have that many today because the city of Detroit has been very aggressively tearing down those houses. But then the question is, what do you do with the neighborhoods next? And one of the articles you're going to read is about that, so you have to read about it. Okay, there's two terms I got to throw out here. And you probably have never heard of them, but redlining and blockbusting were things that really helped cause inner city in a lot of places. Now, the first one, redlining. If you look at the not COVID, just throat's getting sore or dry. If you look at the picture over here, you're going to see this is from Omaha. And if you notice the map there, it's got an area with the red line around it. In Omaha in the 1930s and stuff, the government set up programs. Today we have HUD and stuff like that. But basically what it is to give people loans for houses and stuff. The government, the federal government, would not give people loans in certain parts of the cities. They would draw, look at the map here, a red line. And in Omaha, it became a big problem. There were very few African Americans that really got to live west of 30th Street in Omaha because it was really hard to get a loan to do that. That's why if you go to North Omaha, there's a very interesting place called Carver Savings and Loan, where people in North Omaha try to get money together to get loans and be able to buy property in North Omaha along 24th and all, because the banks weren't doing it. City after city, you have redlining. That's basically where you just don't loan people to buy houses in those areas. And just by saying that there's a problem and you can't buy a house there, and you make it harder for poor people to live in that area, what it does is it means people outside will have the houses and will turn them into rental houses, which destroys neighborhoods, or it gets harder. And a lot of times, basically what you're doing is you're creating a problem. You're creating a slum by doing that. It's harder to do. So North Omaha, which used to be 24th Street, if you look on the map here, 24th Street used to be a booming, vibrant area. Well, that changes everything by the 60s and 70s, And so redlining in city after city has been a big problem. Blockbusting is a whole different thing, and I want to mention this. Didn't really so much happen in Omaha as in other cities like Detroit, big time 60s and 70s. What happened is if there was unrest, like in Detroit, they had riots in 68, 67, 68 and stuff. If there's unrest, there were bad people, bad realtors and stuff that would cause this unrest to say, oh my God, look how our neighbor's changing hood, who's moving in. And they would try to force people to start listing their property and sell out. And they could buy that property, turn around and flip it. They were trying to generate something called white flight, where the white people move out to the suburbs, and it created money. But what it did is it fed a problem, and parts of town people weren't developing as much, and it would develop a lot slower. Blockbusting and redlining in some cities were major causes of destroying neighborhoods, creating parts of the city that are going to have big problems. Okay, but the picture over here shows yes, Omaha at one time did have a problem with redlining. We don't today, and there's a lot of development that going on now. If you drive down off 24th Street, there's new neighborhoods there. There's a lot of development because there's opportunity. So here's a couple pictures I want to point out Detroit. And okay, it's so easy to kick Detroit going, oh my God, look at Detroit. But Detroit does have a problem with this. But Detroit is trying to do stuff with it. One of the articles you're going to read on the classroom is about things that people are actually doing with this. Well, if you look at the pictures, you see the empty neighborhoods or the empty factories. That's a problem. Cities need to tear that stuff down. But then if you have creative leadership, you can redo those areas. You can revitalize them. There's always opportunity. A lot of people see a destroyed neighborhood or a destroyed building, and they go, wow. But other people say, well, and if you have the money and the vision, you can do things with them. But when you look at some of these pictures here, yeah, a lot of the factories that fed the auto industry in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and even in the 70s have shut down. And now we get so many of our supplies from all over the world and the parts come together. It's changed the economic reality. That doesn't mean Detroit's going to eventually be a ghost town because the people of Detroit are something. They'll reinvent their city. Pittsburgh had a little problem, as we'll talk about coming up, where after the steel industry really started to slow down in the 70s, 80s, looked like Pittsburgh was in the same boat. But Pittsburgh has redeveloped itself. It's become a big silicon type thing. It's a technopole. Why? Because if you get creative leadership, you can revitalize. And that's what we're going to talk about Friday. Gentrification and commercialization. All right. So, tale of two cities, St. Louis and East St. Louis. Back in the 1960s, the city fathers of St. Louis realized they needed to do something. Granted, the building of the arch was kind of a really far out there wow thing, but wasn't building an Eiffel Tower in Paris the same thing? Bring ballparks back downtown. We're going to talk about this on Friday. If you're going to get people downtown for sporting events, they'll go ahead and they'll do shopping and stuff.